All right, y'all. Back with part 2 of the Southern Comfort Podcast with our special guest, college boss man, graduate school,
right?
yo himself, Anthony Davis Jr.
Swiss Army knife.
Swiss Army knife. Swiss Army knife. Listen, I'm all about developing Swiss Army knives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. My whole thing was on campaigns, and we just gonna jump right in, y'all. So. On campaigns, you have your departments. You have a political department, you have an organizing department, communications, finance, right? But I was always over organizing, but somehow had to always do political as well. And I felt like they should be one shop, right? And so when I talked to my organizers, they also had to, I want them to communicate with the elected official in their region, right? Know who they are, develop a relationship. So it made no sense for them not to also be the regional political director for it, well, right? So when I had Swiss Army knives, like you are a representation of the campaign, so you're covering everything because if press shows up, you're the point person. Like you need to relay that back to us, and sometimes we're gonna have you stand there and record to make sure. Sarah can say the right thing and get it back to us, right? So you are a Swiss Army knife, right? You need to know the information about fundraising. What's the limit? You can't take cash. You got to take a check. Make sure you write it out to this. Make sure you get it back to us. Photocopy, like just those things. Like you are everything, out there.
Yeah.
So,
but I think that's just true of just being like a black operative, right? Like we don't have the luxury of just doing one thing.
Right.
We have to be able to do everything, multiple things, because a lot of times that's the only work out there, right? So sometimes you might get hired like field, and then it might be finance the next time, or it might be comms. If you want to keep active and keep working, oftentimes we have to be able to do everything. It's just a necessity to survive and build a career. And so a lot of times with us, it's rare. I don't want to say that it's rare, but oftentimes we end up being more generalist. We don't end up being, I just feel like it's rare that you're gonna see a black operative that's like their whole career was like finance or their whole career was comms. That's just not how it works, because you won't work if you do that.
Right. And see, the other thing about that, right, is, and Kevin and I kind of talk about this all the time, where we're applying for a job and they say, well, you don't have this or you don't have this ability and you don't have management experience or leadership experience. And it's like, well, I can't get it if you don't. Right. Hire me
to do it. Yeah.
And so, for your next journey, we kind of cut off the last episode talking about Doug Jones and stick with me. I'm gonna take care of you. I got you. Let's see. I think it was maybe 4 months later, but I would check in with you from time to time, and I called you up and said, hey, I want to bring you on to the Ben Jealous campaign. And I'm gonna be honest with you, some folks looked at your resume and was like, he hadn't done enough. You think he can do the job? I was like, absolutely. Right? Like, sure, he can do it. He got it. Let's get him up here. He's from the area.
I was gonna say, I'm from there.
Right? He's from the area, so what, he can be here tomorrow. He will be here tomorrow.
We've seen him do this.
Right. So,
and I was coming from Georgia. I had been working in congressional race in Georgia, and I remember calling you during that race and like, bro, this is the worst thing. I was going through it, but it's
what race?
I was working Georgia 6 congressional race.
That was the Macbeth.
That she ended up. She ended up winning, obviously. But I was working the primary for Bobby Cape.
Were you working with Richard Merritt?
Richard Merritt wasn't working on that race. But that is just a point about leadership and having a good manager, because I felt like having worked, like that was my first campaign experience after, and this, I remember you telling me this, like that's what you get for like straying away from the family. But I was like, bro, I needed a job, like and I felt like that was one of the things that I had to like learn and grow comfortable with, and eat as well with, like, within this operative space, is like that there are going to be gaps in opportunities, and like planning for that, doing a better job of planning for that, because I don't feel like I necessarily understood that, and so I was I don't want to say desperate, but I, you know, jumped at the first opportunity that I got, and it wasn't necessarily a vetted opportunity, and so I went down and had a terrible experience. And I was thankful when Rich called me and was like,
come up here with us.
Come up here to Maryland. Yeah.
Listen, I said that to you. I said that to Ev. I think you are the only one that actually learned your lesson.
That's true.
He came to Maryland with us.
Yep.
Because I offered Ev my role. We were trying to get Ev to do my role in Maryland. And you know.
Then I told Rich I had time for this. You come do it.
Yeah.
Like, we gotta go.
Right, like, but his dream was to get to DC, and I was like, this is one of the ways you do it.
Path. Yeah.
You know, you got to get up there. You got to be up there, right? Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
But you know, I called you. You was there. Like, you was there. Period.
You, and I don't know if you remember this, but you and Ben were actually in Atlanta.
Fundraising.
Oh yeah.
No, there was a DNC event.
It was the DNC meetings that were for new president. I think it was campaigning. But I remember you calling me. You were just like, come, like, basically tell me come up there, come meet him. I think it was like the day of, like, I threw a suit on and I like ran up there to come meet y'all at it was at the Marriott. Weston. Yep. And I was just like, again, like, I think that I mean, just flexibility and being adaptable has been a key to everything, because I mean, even that is like, I don't know, I'm sure like Rich would have looked out regardless of what happened, but to have that opportunity and to maybe not have gone, who would have known, like, what would have happened. So I mean, actually getting a chance to meet Ben, him getting to meet me face to face in a somewhat intimate setting, and staffing him that day, I felt like, you know, propelled me into being fit for that role as well. So we get you up back home, you know, I'm sure the folks was happy. You know what I'm saying? You were kind of happy.
Well, I learned that I probably don't ever want to live. Well, at that time, I probably shouldn't have lived. I shouldn't have worked on a race where I was from. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't mature enough. I mean, I could do it now. And I have done it now. But at that time, I wasn't mature enough. And I mean, you don't know this, but I was moonlighting some nights. Like, I was out till 2-3 o'clock and then showing up to the campaign office at 7 o'clock. And I mean,
think, like, I didn't know?
That was, I'm sure you did. And I mean, that was normal. But it was different because it was, you know, that was the first time I had actually been living back at home with a little bit of money in my pocket at that time, and like, I actually wanted to be out and about and like have friends and things of that sort. And it was just like, I think like I was distracted a little bit more than I have been on any other race that I had worked on when I was working on Ben's race. Still was on top of my stuff, but you know, just working that race did kind of like show me that I may not want to work in Maryland politics. And then also, I mean, the disappointment as well. Like that race, I mean, I lost the race in Georgia, that was whatever, but that race, losing Ben Jealous's race for governor, like that one actually really hurt me. Like that was the first race that I actually, like the loss, that was the first and only loss that I cried over. Because I learned quickly, like, that's not how you react to this. Like, it's a job ultimately, and it's
gonna happen.
Yeah. But I think it was the loss, but it was also like, I think for me at that point, realized something that I didn't realize about Maryland, which is kind of what we started part one with, is like, Maryland is not this just oasis that PG County is, that Montgomery County is. It's a much larger state, and there's a reason why this state, you know, fluctuates between Republican governors and Democratic governors, and why Republicans win statewide, because we have a proclivity towards that, and because we have pockets of the state that vote that way. And I don't think I had. I mean, that was on that race. That the results of that race was definitely a reality check for me. And it also was a reality check for me in my career as well. Like, don't be so caught up in. And I hate to say it like this, like, because it's not like I was in any other future opportunity I gave less, but it was just like my emotions weren't so connected to the outcome.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the more you consult and you do races and you care about every race that you work on, but then there are just some though that just kind of like pierce to a different level of your just connectedness to them, and a lot of times it's the candidate. It could be their personal story, or it could just be the fact that it just has a tie into home. So like I love doing races in Alabama because it's home. It's where I'm from, and like I said, I always see what we do as a form of public service. And so everybody hears us talk about Randall Woodfin like all the time is because like I'm proud of that. I believe in what he's doing, right, and what he has done, and I think he's a bright spot in an otherwise dim political landscape there. But and Ben's race was certainly one of those races as well. I was very emotionally invested in it, and but it's also one of those races too. Like we're gonna talk about a little bit about here later today, though, where you start to see some of the fractures that exist sometimes within coalition politics. It gets into something you said in the first episode when we was talking about how like black folks and black voters not being monoliths, or this monolithic community. There's diversity in that community, and Maryland is that too, right? Like Prince George's County and Baltimore City are very different places. But if you've not done work there and you don't really know that, you just think, well, that's majority black, that's majority black, so here's what we're going to do. Baltimore people are suspicious of everybody else, and Prince George's County people are suspicious of everybody else. And when you're doing campaigns there, you got to have a Baltimore program, you got to have a Prince George's County program, and they only want to know what you're doing. Prince George's County, once you talking to them about Prince George's County, they ain't worried about the rest of the, you can get to that. But when you come to Prince George's County, you talk about Prince George's County, right? And so, but in that race though, we did see some fissures. Like I always remind people, you had, we underperformed with Democrats, we underperformed with African Americans, we underperformed in Prince George's County, right? And we're running with the guy who used to be the head of the NAACP. So you think if we gonna win anywhere, we about to run up the score in Prince George's County. We did not. And the reason that we didn't was because, in that race, people were worried about taxes and the economy and everything else, and they were worried that if they switched from a Republican to the government switched from a Republican to a Democrat, that their taxes would go up. So what was it like just kind of being there and just seeing like that part unfold in like real time? And it's like in some of those conversations, I'm sure you was probably having with your own family. You probably had uncles being like, I mean, I know that's where you working, but I don't know. I like Hogan.
Friends. And I think that's the beauty of living in Prince George's County, and having had also like the HBCU background. It's like I come back and I this is beyond just like this, I guess, answering this question, but one of the things that I enjoy about being in all these circles is that I get a lot of diverse perspectives. So like I always tell people, like, I'm in 3 group chats. I have a group chat with my fraternity brothers. 20 beyond me is 24 other people in that group chat. I have one with my boys who I started my organization with on campus. It's about 10 of us in that group chat. And then I have another one with my boys that went to McNamara, that I went to high school with. So that's about 50 men along those 3 group chats. About 50 black men specifically.
Do they all vote?
No.
No. Yeah.
And I think that's a part of it. Like that's a part of
reality.
Is that when you have that, 50, even within that, we all have, for the most part, we all are educated. We all have similar lived experiences. Either grew up together, went to college together, pledged a fraternity together, and we don't all have the same political ideology. I had people in one of those 3 group chats, if not multiple, who were supporting Trump this past election cycle openly in the group chat, and so that perspective allows me to see things when people are like, I just don't get why black men. No, I get it. Because I could just type into the group chat real quick and just ask.
It's funny they say that you don't get it because you're not a black man.
And you're not listening to black men. Right. You're not asking black men. But going back to the question about like just watching the election results unfold in Maryland. I remember being, to your point about us underperforming in PG County, I remember being extremely disappointed in PG County. Like, that's where I grew up. I was just like, why are black people in PG County not showing up in droves? And I realized, like, there's a privilege. There's an inherent privilege to living in PG County, where you may not feel that affected by what's happening in politics. And I go back to my parents growing up, like maybe they felt that same privilege to an extent where it was like, regardless of who they vote for, it's not going to make a huge difference to their life because they have local black electeds, they have police chiefs, they have teachers, you have all of this in PG County. So there was this. And I saw it in as I was trying to organize, because to your point, I feel like what you had us doing in Maryland was that like intersection of political and organizing, where we were talking to electors, but we were also kicking off canvases. And it was just like to see kind of the lack of engagement in PG County, even compared to like, obviously Alabama was a very special situation, but it was just like, you have the same chance. Like, you have a chance to elect the first black governor of your state. Like, why is there not this energy around it? And
who was the head of it?
I was just disappointed. I was just disappointed. Yeah, I felt like Ben had the right story.
Yeah, and this was, for me, this was like my second time experiencing that in Maryland, because I was there and did work for Anthony Brown 4 years before. Again, African American lieutenant governor at the time. He's currently the Attorney General and went on to serve in Congress. But I remember being there doing work on his race, and Obama had to come out and do a rally. And so we were in trouble. We were in trouble because it's Maryland. It's supposed to be blue Maryland. Why y'all need the president to come in and campaign to help y'all? But like, we needed help. It wasn't looking good. And I remember that rally, and all those people came. They were excited to see like Barack Obama, and then as soon as like Barack was done talking, they left. They left, right? And Hogan went on to win that race in part because we didn't get the votes we needed in other places among Democrats. And so one of the things I would explain to people in Maryland at that time, because people would say, "But this is a chance to elect the first black governor," and I was like, yeah, but in places like Prince George's County, that's not unusual to them. They have black leadership. That's not compelling to them, A. And then B, they just had a black president. They currently have a black president, at the time when it was Anthony Brown. So just saying I get a black governor is going to be a little bit more than that. But it gets to the laziness sometimes. And like you said about just it being a monolith, right? It's just, they're going to turn out and vote because that's a black person that's running, and that's all that it is to it, right? You don't have to actually do the engagement part there. And so it was 2 cycles in a row where we got our butts handed to us, but a part of that is because of that mentality. And when you go to a place like a Prince George's County, it takes more than that to get there, and it's not just the engagement that you have to do, but it's the diversity of the opinions. Like, it's the diversity of opinions within a household, because you could have a black family and the wife is one place on something, and the husband is completely like somewhere different. And like you said, those group chats, right? These are the conversations that are really, I think, have always been happening, but I think it's starting to come more to the forefront in a lot of our political conversations and discussions, because everybody's trying to figure out, what do we do next? Like, obviously what we have, I think most people can agree it ain't good. Even the people and your folks in your group chat that did vote for him. Once these tariffs and all that other stuff kick in, I'd be interested to see if they still think that was the right move. But anyway, there has to be a pathway forward, and there's just gonna have to be some conversation about how do we get more into forcing people to understand the diversity that exists within these communities, and what's our responsibility as operatives to kind of drive those conversations. But I don't know about y'all, but I feel like been saying that for years.
Well,
like it's not new.
Well, we definitely been saying for the past 7, 8, 9 episodes. So,
yes.
It's that consistent drum beat that's finally gonna seep in at some point.
Hopefully.
So let's go. You cry like a baby at the bend.
I drove from Baltimore to DC that night.
I know. But think about this though, bro. You elected a Democrat in Alabama before you did in Maryland.
Right? not only a Democrat in Alabama, one who locked up,
who prosecuted
for
the
Klan.
But you couldn't get the NAACP president elected in Maryland.
You kind of show up for
right? So let's, I think at that point I had established my firm, and with Ben, that's when we had like multiple clients.
Yeah.
And we were busy, right? Up and down the eastern seaboard from Boston to Alabama, to Jackson, Mississippi, right? So I once again, during that time I was up in Boston, Ben wraps up and I say, who do we think we can put here? I'm like, let me put College Anthony here.
Ben hadn't even wrapped up.
Yeah. And we knew about SB, and then even then I was still doing Ben, but I was in Florida. On the ground in Florida for Dylan.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I say, I talked to Tracy, and Tracy was like, "Can College Anthony do it?" And I was like, what kind of question is that? Hell yeah. So we get you up to Boston. Your supporter housing.
That was amazing.
You
stayed there first. You broke it in for me.
But we should explain to people what supporter housing is.
Supporter housing, when you're working a campaign, the goal is to always save as much money as possible. So when you're doing events and you're more than 2.5, 3 hours away, or it just takes a lot of time, instead of getting a hotel, you look to, someone who's associated with the campaign, be it a donor, a close friend, or a volunteer who has an extra bedroom or a place for you to lay your head for a night or two, or in this case, sometimes the entire campaign. And I've had some great supporter housing, and I've had some not so pleasant supporter housing. And you're supposed to be grateful and appreciative of anyone offering up your home, but sometimes the situation just ain't what's up. So, but Anthony has been benefited well from me ensuring that he was okay. So you kick it up to Boston with Ayanna, you are being my eyes and ears on the ground. That situation is very special to you, just for many reasons. But just go ahead and just talk about that experience shifting above the Mason-Dixon line and entering in Northeastern politics with a whole different type of culture in Boston, but you're actually, once again going for a black woman to beat an incumbent of a congressional district
and become the first black woman to represent
the state's history.
The state in Congress.
Man, it's not enough I can say about that experience, that time. That race, I think, really did. It grew me in a different way. I think to your point about being, this was my first time I was actually asked to be an organizer versus organizing college students. I think on Ben's race, I, like I said, was doing kind of political and organizing. But this was the first time I got turf. I had a region, and I was like, all right, you're responsible for this. So, like, that race allowed me to really, like, learn some of those skills of, like, those hard skills of organizing, cutting turf, pulling lists, etc. And at the same time, I hated it. If I'm being honest, like so I went to work on the campaign for like the last 5 weeks, I want to say. And once I got there, I was, we're in the thick of it, so we're running. So I was basically in the office and then back to my supporter housing every day. And I didn't really get to like explore the city. And what I got to see about the city, I was like, it's August, it's already cold up here. It's no happy hour. It's nothing. It's not like socially. There's not a space. There's not. Where's the black community? Like, so I was just like, I'm never coming back. I knew that at least. I wanted to win the election, but I was like, I'm never coming back.
Joke's on you.
Yeah. Here I am. 7 years later. But. Yeah, so I got to learn some of those skills on that campaign, and then also I don't think as much I got exposed to it then, but I started to see. I think it's more of a difference in the electorate in Boston versus in Alabama or Georgia, and I'll say that more so from I go back to privilege. I think that folks in the Northeast, and I mean we see this playing out right now, and how people are reacting to what's happening on the federal level. Like folks in Alabama and Mississippi and Oklahoma and West Virginia, like they're not overreacting because this is what's happening on their state level every day. Right. But in Massachusetts, I can tell you see like this, like, oh my gosh, like, and they're ignoring the fact that you have state leaders who are fighting tooth and nail to protect you and to make sure that you can enjoy your nice blue state life. And so there's a inherent, I think, I don't want to say privilege, but I think that is the word, but the voters in northern politics and Northeast, I think they hold their electeds to a much higher regard. They expect to be able to access them. They expect to be able to speak with them when they have an issue, and if they don't respond, then that's an issue. If they don't show up for your block party, that's an issue, because there is that sense of entitlement to which they should have. At the end of the day, these are your representatives, so there is, to an extent, that it makes sense. But what I see is that folks in the Northeast sometimes are too smart for their own good. Especially in Massachusetts, you have a ton of colleges. You have Harvard, you got MIT, you got Berkeley. You have a whole bunch of, a lot of education happening in the space, and a lot of times, like, folks feel as though they're smarter than you as the organizer. And I think that's something that I end up running into, that I ran into a lot when I first got there. Before I, kind of established myself, was a lot of folks questioning me. I think I experienced that in the South, but it was different. It was like, you're young, but to me, what I was experiencing in the Northeast was more so, what are your credentials? Right. Like, who have you worked for? How do you know what you're doing? Do you actually know how to execute? And that, I think, forced me to kind of grow up and learn these more hard skills for organizing, maybe quicker than I maybe would have. And then also, like, the campaign was very formidable for me in my life because, on top of winning an historic election, sending a black woman to represent the state of Massachusetts for the first time in 250-year history of the state. I conveniently met my better half while I was working on that campaign. In passing, actually, I was running a staging location. So to give people a little better in lingo, staging location is kind of during the campaign, during kind of the get out the vote period. You have stations all around the district, and I was running a staging location where you can, phone bank out of, you canvas out of, people volunteer stop by to get what they need. And I was running a staging location out of Dorchester, which is where my wife is from. And her mother happened to stop by they were volunteer, they were coming to canvas, coming to knock doors. And I got them set up and, on their way, but something about that woman stuck in my brain, like well after that experience and encounter, and I was just like,
cancer.
I'm like, now out of the 5 weeks of me being in Boston,
right,
I ain't seen nobody who looked like that,
right,
and I ain't seen nobody that make me want to come back, but she made me want to come back, that was really, obviously life-changing, because now we're married, and
you live where?
And we still live up in Boston, and right in Dorchester, actually, in that same neighborhood where we met each other.
Still ain't found a happy hour.
And still ain't got a happy hour.
But that's another part of it too, because like we were talking about earlier about like it becomes like your family, because those are the only folks that you like around, and a lot of people do meet their spouses on campaigns, and so it's weird because it's like you're working like all the time, but you do somehow manage to have like a life. People, like I said, they meet their spouses and everything. They meet lifelong friends, and you're like, I don't even know how that happened, because all we was doing, we was always in the office. Yeah. So I don't even know how we became friends, right? Yeah. Or built a friendship. But one of the things you said too that I thought was interesting is like how you were questioned, right, about your credentials. And I don't think this is like unique to politics. I think this is in any field, particularly. I joke all the time, like every job I ever had, I was either too young or too black. It was one or the other.
Yep, that's it.
That they had a problem with. But what's interesting though to me too is when as you start to do more races like around the country, and particularly like you gauge in the African American community, you can say to black folks in Boston, they'll say, well, what's your credentials? You say, well, I did Doug Jones. Black folk delivered that. They like, that's Alabama.
Right.
That ain't got, this is black people from Boston.
Right.
And it's so it's like, so it's still like a different world again. Like I said, when we talk about that version. I remember being in Iowa, it helped me out a little bit, because like most of the black people from there, like in the Davenport hour, they just a generation from Mississippi. Yeah. Or something like that. So you can still kind of do it, but you start organizing like around the country, and this gets into wanting to just put everybody into a box. Black people in California is a very different electorate than black people in Mississippi. Black people in Mississippi is a very different electorate than black people in Boston. North Florida and South Florida, very different black people. So you have to prove yourself.
There is a foundation of similarities, yes. Right? But like just culturally, right? There's just some things you got to learn in Boston. Yeah. And get it, acclimated to. Yeah. That you just can't do in Jackson, Mississippi.
No, it's very different.
Very different. Or a PG County, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there may be a happy medium in between there. I always say Maryland was like that happy medium of the North and the South, right? DC is a mix of Atlanta and New York.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, like, just to the question, and I guess I kind of touched on this already, but like when I was working on the Benjella's race and even working on Doug's race, I never felt like I needed to like say who I had worked for before. Like I had to once I was in spaces, prove that I was mature enough, like because that's what it was. It was the age. Like they were looking at me. I was 24 when I was working on that race. Yeah, and I don't have a physique that is very intimidating. So I had to like establish myself, and the only way I knew how to do that was through like showing people that I knew what I was talking about.
Being competent. Yep.
And so but once and to your point about like once I was in Boston, it wasn't like they didn't care about they wanted to know what you knew, but they didn't care about the previous experience. They wanted to know what you knew and what you knew about Boston and what you knew about Massachusetts politics. And being on Ayanna's race, like I obviously didn't have a lot of history, but then like down the line, like I've been in Massachusetts politics now for the last 7 years as well, and now it's like my name precedes me to an extent in some of these rooms.
But they don't call you college, which
no, they didn't know him then.
They know better.
Yeah. So all right, so what was after Pressley? Oh wait, shit, you joined us. I told you to
Mississippi.
Bring your ass to Mississippi,
Boston,
right?
Came back to Mississippi.
You was rolling, bro.
Mississippi.
You was.
Well, my Impala got so many miles that year, 2018. I did Georgia, Maryland, Boston, Mississippi.
You was rolling.
Yeah.
Man, and Mississippi, I mean, again, there's plenty of ways to skin a cat, but in Mississippi, it was just a totally different Southern experience. Far from, they need some real work in terms of just foundational
infrastructure.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
And again,
and I felt like that was my first real introduction to the South. Because even I felt like the Alabama race was just such an anomaly with the opponent, with the time of year, the fact that it was a runoff, and nationally everybody was paying attention to this race, and so it almost didn't feel like you were in Alabama because there were so many people who were coming in from other places to
because of the
help.
national focus.
But in Mississippi, it was totally different.
Yeah.
I was obviously doing. Not obviously, but I was doing college student organizing, campus organizing, and I finally had my first, I had my own team. You set me up. That was my first campaign where I had 4 kind of folks underneath me who were all organizing their own different campuses, and I was managing them. But I remember hearing a story from one of the campuses where there was one of the voting locations where it was on campus, but within kind of eye shot of the polling location there was men on the back of a pickup truck with rifles.
Yep.
And I just remember hearing that story, and I was just like, bro, what year are we in? It's 2018. But that's what I expected when I came to Alabama. But I that race also,
So whenever I do a race, I want to make sure I leave it and install something that they can continue to build on, right? Like that is always my goal. With Doug, it was more so that we needed internal infrastructure to be successful because we knew we weren't going to get it outside anywhere else. They also didn't really know what they knew or didn't know, right? So it was just like they didn't know what Vote Builder was, right? This was a congressperson in Alabama, like, what is that? Couldn't even pronounce it.
And most of the campaigns didn't have money to even buy it.
Right.
It wasn't a thing. You just
Yellow Pages.
People kept lists. They just had lists.
Right. I mean, not much changes, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Earl runs the funeral home. Bobby Jesse got the shop, right? Who's who, and their sons or family continue the business.
Right.
In Mississippi, it was a whole new validation of who you are, what you know. This is different. We Mississippians. We real blacks. Okay. Fatback is fatback. Right? There are no vegetables here. I understand. I get it. Right? But they needed infrastructure on a whole new level. And I think my goal there was, of course it was to win, but it was also to like open their eyes up and say, y'all can have so much more here because of, you know, the amount of black people that I actually want elected, and 2, occupy major cities and important districts in the state.
State's like 40% black.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, I was trying to get them, but it was a good old boys game amongst the blacks in Mississippi, which became problematic. Such and such need his cut. Such and such wants this. Let him run this because he know. And when it boiled down to it, nothing was getting done. And I wanted the candidate himself to see that. I was like, oh, who's in charge of doing this? Well, that was supposed to be y'all. No, sir. No, ma'am. Like, you know, because if it was, it would be successful, right?
Yep.
You know, I told you when we first sat down, I get shit done. That's exactly what I said to you. Now let us get shit done. You know, because again, I brought Kevin ass in there, and he saw it and sat back and was just like, "Where's the fried chicken?"
Sweet tea.
You know, but again, they did well with what we were able to do, and get them to fall in line. And the last, I would say, 2.5, 3 weeks is when that happened. So.
Yeah, that campaign was running totally different from when I first got there to by election day. It was a totally different campaign. It was just 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And you like we talk about all the time. Like you often don't see it because like one of the challenges with winning in the South is like a lot of the if there are operatives that have like a broad base of experience, they don't. A lot of that expertise doesn't come back to the South, right? And I said this on a prior episode too. Like a big part of that though is because, you know, there is a business side, right, to this, and a lot of the lucrative work is not in the South. So you have people like us that are from the South and understand it and know it and care about it. But, you know, we also have payrolls and everything else to make, and that's just not where the big race is. And so a lot of times they don't get the benefit of that talent and expertise, even if it's from there, even if it's rooted there, right? And so you end up, when there are these opportunities for a gain and an advancement, there's always this tension between the folks that are like on the ground and have been there, and then the like new people that are just kind of coming in now. And there's a lot of times where even if it means their own advancement gets held back, they will do that just to, in their mind, not have you be the one benefiting because you're not the one who's been here and been in the trenches, even if you know how a way to do it better. And that happens all the time. Like all the time. And the politicians that have been successful in the South, that have won some of those big races, and we've been a part of a lot of those campaigns, are the ones that get that understand you got to build a coalition within the coalition, right? And it's going to be a mix of folks that are here and know the local community and the local churches and everything else. But I also need somebody that knows how to do a smart media buy for me. And we don't get on TV a lot down here, so it can't just be I talk to so and so at the station. No, you know. So
and you can't have your cousin shooting the ad. Just because you're trying to get your cousin broke off, right? Like you lifting weights is not what the public wants to see, right? That shows nothing about what you're gonna do for us. That just shows you got some muscle. A muscle.
So,
and I'm actually being serious about that being an ad. Wasting resources.
People, I can film that. I could do that.
Yeah, go ahead. BET Uncut video.
But actually that was a tough one.
It was.
You know, he was a Howard grad. First African American to be agriculture secretary, and we were running against, somebody who was making jokes about like hanging people,
attending a public
hanging, and all of that kind of stuff.
And he was a business.
And
He
said
was
something
a
about
business.
HBCUs as well.
Yeah.
I think she came for the HBCUs in the state.
She
I
did.
can't remember.
She did.
Yeah.
I don't even remember her name.
Cindy Highsmith.
Okay.
But to her
Drama, remember?
but this tells you like the full how this stuff goes full circle. Like now I work with her office to funding for HBCUs.
Wow.
Because she know.
Yeah. So
But she knew what would rile up her people to get out and vote, right?
to win. And in Mississippi, it's just one of them states. We talked about this in a prior episode too about, how do we bring back like white Southern Democrats too, right? And the challenges there. And until we unlock that piece, that's part of what we have to unlock to really be successful there. But like in Mississippi, that's just one of the things we ran into. We did a great job turning out African Americans. There's a lot of potential there on that vote, but at the end of the day, there are just not enough white people who are willing to vote for a Democrat in Mississippi for it to work. And, and people will say, well, that's because Mike was black. Well, it's not because Mike was black. Like they see black people every day. That's not the issue. It's like he's a Democrat.
But they also
problem is he's a Democrat.
They
I
like Mike.
For a
it's almost like we like Mike. Mike cool.
Yeah.
He helped my catfish farm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
They've been working with him.
Right?
They like him.
Because of Mike Espy, catfish is as popular as it is. He's the one who helped get catfish into the army to feed the soldiers. Right?
Well,
that's why, because they got it from Mississippi. Right? And so while he was
congressman,
he was the one who was like, y'all can get it from Mississippi. We got catfish farms, and then they started growing. More farmers started producing it, right? And now that's why it's a thing, right? The soldiers were eating catfish. He said all you need to do is fry it.
Fry it. Yep.
Yep. So shout out to Mr. Mike Espy. He should have been U.S. Senator Mike Espy, but alas, make sure you listen to the podcast. All right, so
get him on.
After Espy, what was next? Because it's hazy for me.
Yeah, unemployment, and that's always in between everything. But then I actually went to work. This is when I went to work on the Hill for.
Wait, did you do the Thanksgiving in Mississippi?
Yep.
You didn't have to go get the turkey this time.
No, I didn't have to go get the turkey.
You had been promoted, so you could just come to dinner.
We chilled. We did. We went to the movies the night before. We went to see Creed. And then we had dinner the next day. I woke up late and everything, and it was already cooking.
Man, Creed helped push me through. Creed
that
2,
movie did.
Man,
it was motivation. I don't know why it was first.
It was Creed 2.
I love all, and it's so crazy because we spend a lot of time like flying. Almost every flight I watch, I just go watch Creed. Like I see that movie several times.
That thing gets you going, bro.
Yeah.
Well, 80s montage music.
Even though it's like funny to me too, especially like when Michael B. Jordan gets like knocked out, and like you can actually see like how little he is. I'm just like, now Michael B. Jordan ain't whipping nobody. But we are all the way believing. This. That's how good the script is. That's how good the script is. They got us thinking Michael B. Jordan little ass is out here really knocking people out.
So, let's see, that was 18, was it?
Yep. So I went and I did a little moonlight on the Hill after, like, starting in 2019.
I said, you're a body man.
Yeah, she had me driving her, bodying her. And that was kind of a in-between stint before I went to come back up to Boston to work on Senator Warren's presidential race.
So I called Ayanna. I was like, listen, I need my boy back. So you have to break that off.
She always knew it was temporary. She knew I wasn't sticking around.
Yeah. and
that wasn't the life for me. I mean, I enjoyed my time there, and I think I enjoyed getting to get close, getting to build on my relationship with her. Yeah. And also, my wife was my boss at the time, so I was reporting to her. Very fair.
What you made at the time. They never changed.
So, those two pieces were really great about it, but the day-to-day was entirely too slow for me.
So you ain't like the legislative, you like the outside advocacy campaign, that kind of fast pace of that.
Yeah. The day-to-day, like that, like I was talking about in the last episode, like that day-to-day competition piece, like I just realized I couldn't get that on the hill, so and I realized that early. I'm glad I got that experience though, because I feel like I've been asked, a few times since then, like as I worked on campaigns and they won, like, hey, you want to come work in administration? I just know now, like, that's not for me.
That's not your thing.
Yeah.
So then you end up, all right, so you go back, you're going to do Liz Warren, so this is 2020, so this is going to be your first
2019.
2019, that's right. 2020 cycle, 2019. So this is going to be your first, like, presidential. And did you put, like, a lot of, like, thought into it? And what I mean by that is like, oh man, I'm about to go from, I've done a lot of state and local congressional races and stuff like that. Now I'm about to do a big presidential, or were you just kind of like, nah, I was just ready to get off the hill. I just wanted to work.
It was something that was like on my vision, like a vision board.
I want to do a presidential.
And like I said earlier, I did feel like once I realized what Rich was doing, like dragging me around the country, was really like preparing me to be able to do that. Like, because I had at that point now lived in 4 different states and organized in 4 different states, like I understood what it meant to kind of be dropped into a place and to have to figure out how to be flexible, how to figure out how to be adaptable, how to learn quickly the culture of the place and learn the people and figure out how to relate to them. And so, like, it made sense to me. I was terrified going to do it because it was early. I mean, I felt like it was early in the cycle. It was March when I came on in 2019. And yeah, I was terrified. I was just like, again, having that imposter syndrome of like, do I actually know what I'm doing here?
But you can actually tell. I could tell. And I remember having a conversation with you about it, right? Like, trust yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember that conversation, and I feel like that conversation definitely, it pushed me, and I go back to Mamba mentality. It was just like, all right, you here now, like, figure it out. Figure it out and be good at it. Like, not just figure it out and not just do it, but figure out how to be good at it. And I remember, like, we were spending like weeks at a time out on the road sometime, and I talk about this a lot now. Like, I was sent to Tennessee for a week at a time, and I would have to go to Nashville and Knoxville and why am I blanking on major cities?
Memphis,
Tennessee, Memphis, and having to travel, like, go to 4 different cities in the state and within that week, and in each of those places you're hopping out of a car, you're doing a training for a new group of people in each of those spaces, and each time you have an hour or 2 hours maybe. You have to validate yourself really quickly to the crowd. They have to respect you or enough to listen to you and give you that attention. You have to train them, and then you have to ideally figure out a way to kind of stay in touch with them, keep them organized, hop in a car, drive to the next city. And when I think about doing that a week at a time in Tennessee, it took me back to Alabama. And like the fear of in 2017 driving to Tuscaloosa less than an hour away to come back with the turkey. Now I'm driving across Tennessee and I don't have that same fear. Same thing with going to Mississippi. Like, I had to do the same thing in Mississippi, and traveling around Mississippi, felt this, just felt a different type of confidence than I felt even in 2018 when being there with Mike Espy's race. It was just like, I know what I'm doing now, and I get what I'm doing, and I'm confident in what I'm doing. And in each of these spaces, I just felt more and more validated as I went and did the work. So yeah.
All right. And what actually, because I don't know what we actually said, what actually was like your title? You were,
I was the Southern Regional Organizing Director.
Nice. All right.
For, what was this, Warren?
Yeah. When I was listening to an episode, and you had 12 states when you did Hillary.
Is that what you said?
So I had the first 7 southern states, and then it was Connecticut, DC, and
well, you gave me 12 in the South. Starting in Maryland, and I went down Virginia, North Carolina, obviously not South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Tennessee,
Arkansas.
and Arkansas.
What differences did you see just in terms of just like campaign structure, infrastructure? Did you still feel like you could talk in the meetings yet? Like what differences did you see between like that presidential versus some of the other stuff you had been doing?
Oh, I felt very small. Like even in comparison to Alabama, I want to explain. Even in comparison, I know we running up on time, but even in comparison to Alabama, like I felt like the race was just so much bigger than me, obviously. And I think we as the organizing team at the time when we first started, it was very small. So Rich did a good job of. We had a lot of closed door meetings, and that's where our voices were heard. And then he would be our advocate, into the bedroom. And you know, again, in that space, there weren't, and I think it's important to say, like, there weren't a lot of black men, and there weren't a lot of heterosexual black men. And I think that that's also like an honest truth about the situation. And so, besides Rich, I didn't really identify with anyone on the campaign. So living in a city that I still didn't like that much at that time.
Nowhere to hang out.
Nowhere to hang out, not really having like a community or a tribe. It was, again, just kind of work and home. And I remember like having to like, whenever we had a weekend off, like I'm going to DC, like I'm driving or I'm flying to DC real quick, like to go be with friends. And so like that experience, it showed me a lot. Like it showed me like the gravity of like once you get to that scale of like what an election looks like. And it also allowed me to like, I think over time find my voice as well, like or realize where my voice was being excluded from. And I think that was even more empowering for me, because when I kind of coming out of the election and the election ended, COVID started, so it was a lot happening at that time. But I remember that summer, like after Warren wrapped up in March of 2020, that summer, telling one of my friends, like, I'm going to start my own consulting firm. I was like, at this point, I've done races on pretty much every level. I've moved around the country working on races, and I may not on a presidential level have the knowledge or requisite experience to be in some of those rooms, but on a local level I absolutely should be now. And for me, that realization didn't necessarily come with a business plan or kind of a game plan of how I was going to make that happen, but I knew like that was the next step for me, was starting my own thing and being able to be in that room where I felt like my voice was being excluded from.
And then a lot, and that happens like a lot, right? Because I know for me, I always explain myself as an accidental entrepreneur. I stumbled into it, and part of the reason I stumbled into it is because when I would try to go work at the other firms, they either don't hire you, or they want to hire you and basically pay you like nothing. And so there have been times where I've tried to fold into companies, or I will go there and say, I'm bringing this book of business, and like they'll take your book of business, but then they'll want to pay you, well, we're not having any other partners though. Right. So you want to pay me a staff salary, but you want to take my book of business, right? And so particularly like on the media side, where there just is not a lot of diversity at all. I ended up just stumbling into it and just starting my own companies, right, for that same reason. But what's funny to me though is that I feel like, and I'd be curious if you feel the same. I feel like though it's like every cycle though you start over.
Yeah.
Right. It really doesn't matter that I've done the last 5 presidentials and all this other stuff, and we can go down the stat sheets for everybody at the table. It doesn't matter, right? In this next one, it's like I'm starting over from 0. And do you kind of still feel that like, oh, I still have to justify myself and prove myself?
Yeah. Yeah, year after year, I feel like that's kind of the task, and also the challenge. And it's like, as an entrepreneur, like, you figure out ways to, I guess, supplement. Like, you work with organizations here and there. You may work with other, like, businesses to, like, help them with community engagement and things of that sort to kind of supplement. But like, where my heart is, and like the heart of what I want our firm to do is help get people elected, help train the next generation of organizers. And so I do feel that. I feel that challenge, and I think like that is something that I'm getting more used to. And I think similarly to like having to get used to being unemployed between campaign cycles. It's like understanding that Q1 every year is going to be
slow.
It's going to be slow. It's going to be slow. It's going to be time to find people and identify races.
That's also an opportunity for you to kind of try to identify, mold, and build your own candidate and your own, right? Like, and I don't think you're not in that realm of wanting to identify and find more candidates to put out there, right? You just come to me and I'll help you deliver and build out a message.
Do I want to
think about it too long,
do I care about cultivating?
The answer is no.
It's not that I wouldn't say I don't care about it, but I don't know. No, I don't think that's what my career has been. I think,
but it's not your role, right?
Yeah.
If in the team of things, like, that's not your role, right? You're not player development. You're not, you know what I'm saying? You're not, you're not a scout, right? But you can, from a 30,000 foot view, see somebody who may have the potential, but reeling them in, right? Like, I would bring you in and help close a deal on somebody, but outside of, having you going out and trying to find and seek and build a candidate, no, that's just
they're a little more advanced in the process. They already know they want to be a candidate.
Oh, but you also don't have the patience for it.
I'm a very patient person.
Okay, so Warren, I think one of the things I want to get on with Warren was when we did rallies, having you do the call to action, the lead, playing that role, and what was that like? Because you were very hesitant at first, and I was almost like Joe Jackson. You better get on that stage. I
mean, it was, again, like
and you had a breakout moment that everybody was like, "Oh, yeah."
It was at it was in Virginia at George Mason.
How many people?
We were on that was the C-SPAN. C-SPAN.
Yeah.
It was at least 1,000 people in the crowd.
Wow.
And I gave the field pitch after. No, I think I gave Phil pitch before, and I welcomed her onto the stage. And I remember going back to my phone afterwards and just seeing like so many people posting about it, and I was just like, oh shit, like, this is cool. And I was, but again, like, I just always had that imposter syndrome, I guess, of like saying the wrong thing or going up there and saying something, inaccurate or unintelligent, and I'm just like, had to get over that fear. And full circle moment. So in November of 2019, either October or November of 2019, Senator Warren came to the AUC.
October.
And she did a rally at Clark, and I actually got to kick off the rally. You know, actually like give a little bit of my story about like returning back to the returning back to the AUC, and like introduce her and welcome her to our camp, like to my Morehouse brothers, to my Spelman sisters, to my Clark family, like, and it's like very personal, and like that moment for me, like I still have that picture is like picture of from behind us in the crowd, and it's one of my favorite pictures from my career, because again, it was a full circle moment of me introducing a presidential candidate on my college campus. It's like, you want to talk about the kid in 2012 who was at Lower Manly? Like, that kid would have never thought that he would be doing that, and 8 years later, like, that's,
I mean, it's been a good journey for you. I think, you know, watching you on the Warren campaign, right? Like, I had to continuously give you a nudge, but again, very few of us are in those spaces, right? And I was trying to get you in front of the people you needed to be in front of, so they could also see what I know and see and saw, right? And so if you were in the room, you're supposed to be there, period, right? So, you know, whenever you are in someone's, you know, like in their house, in their room, in front of them, you're meant to be there. So that's your opportunity to take advantage of the situation. And I think you did that, right? Like, you know, but being a black man in that space is just very difficult. But being a straight black, I mean, you touched on it, being a straight black man when there's so very few of you, and, you know, it decreased.
Yeah.
You know, it's a difficult situation to navigate, and when you don't have others around you to support you, you know, it's like a sink or swim mentality.
Yeah, definitely. And I felt like, I mean, you know, after, you know, you were no longer there, I did feel like I kind of got thrown to the wolves to an extent. Like, it was just like, to your point, it was like, figure it out. They soon after, like, they sent me out to Georgia, and I became the Georgia state director. But one, like, she never made it to Georgia. She never made it to the primary in Georgia, and to an extent, like, I knew that was going to happen. And so even like taking that job, I think that there was a desire to get out of the headquarters at that time, because of things that had happened, and also like now I'm feeling alone. I was like, at least if I go to Georgia, like, I can live there. I lived with two of my line brothers in their house that they own, was paying them rent, and got to see other friends and colleagues from college. So it was just like, at least I will have some type of community if I go down here. Like, they may not help me at all. They're not gonna come knock a door. They may not do anything, but I'll at least have people that I identify with and feel comfortable with. And like, I didn't have that in the headquarters at all.
What are you most appreciative of over your career? All right, so you've been in the game, what? Are you 10 years in?
I take 2016.
Damn. God.
Because you know, at the NAACP, we were doing a lot to try to get out the vote for Hillary.
Oh yeah,
but
count.
Yeah.
So count that.
Yeah.
That is
in a different way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so 9 years in. What am I? Your question is, what am I thankful for?
Like, no, like, what are the lessons that
I feel like
you've
we
learned?
sitting here talking about the Carter campaign. You remember back in 76? It was us and Ed Muskie, and we were.
we should pass out peanuts. Was that buying the vote?
You know, like, should we run ads on TV? I think radio. But anyway.
Back in my day, we had pork chops and Coca-Cola.
Right.
Well, one, it's hard to find good people to work with and to also like stay connected to. And Rich, I'm really thankful for you. Like, I was actually telling someone the other day, like, I've had a few kind of recent situations where I had to reconsider what a mentor was, and redefine what that was for me. And at no point in that redefinition were you removed from that. And the reason why is because I've let you drag me around the country, but you did that with intention, and there was, to me, an end goal to it, a purpose to it. And since then, I've been able to, at any point, if I needed help, advice, guidance, call you. I remember I told someone the story the other day, after Senator Warren's race, I went on to do our mayor of Boston, Mayor Wu's campaign as our field director. That was my first time being a field director. I had never put together.
In that place you don't like.
Back in Boston, another election, citywide. I had never put together a budget, and I remember again having that moment of, oh God, I don't know what I'm doing. And I called Rich, and not only did he have a template for me, but then he sat on the phone with me and actually talked through how exactly, how to put it together, how to think about it, how to scale things month to month, and to me, that's been one of my biggest lessons for my entire career is, one, just the importance of keeping good people around you, and knowing that it's hard to find those people. So when you find them, keep them. Two, I think it's something that's been kind of talked about a lot, but it's just being flexible and being nimble in these spaces, and being adaptable. Never feeling like you know too much coming into the space, and always being willing to listen. I've been something that I take a lot of pride in, that people give me credit for, is that I'm a good listener. And I think that a lot of my experiences, my political experience, has kind of turned me into that. Like I said, in 2017, being a fly on the wall in the office in Doug Jones' race, and from there on, just talking less, but when I talk, that making sure that it matters. And I feel like that's a lesson in its own. It's just not always feeling like you have to be the one that's talking the most in the room, or that you say the most, but that when you do talk, that it's something of value, that it's quality. And then I think the last piece is just, and this is something that I tell young people a lot now, is being open to new experiences. Never saying just flat out no to something before you even try it. If I had said no to Alabama, I wouldn't be sitting here today. If I had, because I had never been to Alabama, I never worked on a campaign. I could have a lot of reasons to have said no. I got to be there in 2 days. But if you say yes to things, you never know what that could turn into in life.
Well, one thing that I can say is, and it's something I've never done, is beat Kevin, which you have done.
But you know what though? But that's how it's supposed to be. A, and then B. This whole time we've been talking about you coming on the show, and whatever I kept saying about how proud I was. I said, he just whooped my ass. They just beat me in a race. But that's how it's supposed to be, though. Right? You're supposed to help and put something back and try to help encourage the next person along. And we were all sitting here talking about how we got into these rooms and these positions, and we felt like we were kind of the only one. It wasn't anybody else. Well, this is a part of a responsibility that we shoulder, right? Is to put back into that pipeline and help pull somebody else along, so that ultimately, eventually, you get to a point where it doesn't look like that, So, so it is a full circle moment for me, because we go from working together and just trying to pass on knowledge or anything that we might have to you, and helping with jobs or whatever the case may be, to now this rolled up on me and then beat me.
Called me,
but that's a good thing.
He called me.
That's a good thing.
You want to beat Anthony's ass?
But I had to say in fairness, because we're not going. And I can say this because we're not really going to get into names. But I was now I think he's gonna win this one. I'm pretty sure. But anyway, if you want to just try to compete against him, we could just do it, and maybe we can pull off something. But nope.
And I got lucky. I mean, I got the right call from the right person. And I took that call again, saying yes. You never know where it'll take you.
Right. Yep. So I love that though.
But you went against the family.
Man.
It's about family.
Proud.
But listen, man, you're doing your thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 9 years into the game, I don't think I was at the level you're. No, I don't know. Too old to remember. That's how you that's how you make me feel now.
Yeah.
Long in the tooth.
I remember things about who was the president. Tell me who was the president. I can tell you what I was doing then. I was in college. Yeah. I was in college. Well, Obama, starting with Obama, Bush still president.
It's my first campaign.
When that started.
So, if 10 years in the game, my first campaign was 2006. So 2016, I was on Hillary. So
16. Yeah.
I mean, you got me presidential marks. What? 3 years.
You got
2 years into.
You got you that.
Mm-hmm.
You got you that.
Thank you.
You
I
know,
appreciate you.
just like how you got top 150 most influential people in Boston.
I love it.
Look at that.
See?
You up there with Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Light skin.
That's true.
So, man, that's, credit to yourself, but I definitely feel you on the talent aspect, the talent pool. And that is something I'm actually trying to get back into, is creating, identifying, and developing new talent, right? Because there are apparatuses out there that say they do it, but look at where we are right now.
Yeah. There's a. That's all I hear. Is that we don't have a bench. We don't have a bench of candidates or operatives. Yeah.
My goal is to, just like I got Swiss Army knives like you out there, I want some candidates. I see pride. I see power. I see a badass. Right? So, that's something that, is like my new passion right now.
Mm-hmm.
So before we end out, where can folks find you? How can folks find you? More information about you.
More importantly, where can people hire you?
Right, drop your tags, your IG,
Well, thedavidsystem.com is where you can really find everything that's on business. Started in 2021, and at the THE_AJ system is my personal handles on all platforms as well.
Nice.
You want to give a special shout out to anybody,
Well, if I'm given this opportunity, I always will give a special shout out to my wife, and just for her, just relentless support, and belief, honestly. Like, I remember when we started the business, I gave myself basically 6 months to try to make something happen with the business. And by that 6 month mark, she was actually leaving her job that she was at to join the business. And I don't think that that's anything short of like faith and trust in me, and the vision, and understanding that it wasn't just like because it was happening at that 6 month mark, didn't necessarily mean it was going to happen 4 years later, but she believed that. So definitely have to give her a special shout out. And then my parents, ultimately I always give them love in these type of situations, because they modeled for me service. And Kevin, I love what you said about just like this, what we do is public service, and I see it in the same way. My parents, again, they weren't political, but my dad was a deacon in the church. My mom ran the nursery in the church. My dad was a coach in the community. And so I always saw my parents serving and not volunteering their time. And so, and then obviously like the name Davis, I wouldn't have it without them. So just like the name of the business, everything is just, I give to them as well.
Nice.
Now, has that changed? Are they more political now?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, my father for sure. He's locked in on CNN and MSNBC. But he's also, when you were talking about families in Maryland in one household, even when I first started, and I mean, I can't even say that he's grown a lot, I will say, from when I first got into politics. But my dad is definitely center to right of center, especially on social, some of the social politics, social issues.
Southern black man.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
He originally from Maryland?
He's originally from, grew up in D.C., but our family from West Virginia and Ohio.
Well,
so
there you go.
There you go. Yep.
Bye-bye. All right. Well, again, a special shout out to Miss Aaron. Please spell my name right, Davis.
Always.
And mom and pops. Ready to close out the show?
Yeah.
Kev?
My mambo?
Yeah.
Also, I'm gonna give mine to Ayanna Pressley because I know we were talking about her. What you gonna say? I stole yours again. It's 435 members of the house that you could have picked. So I picked the one you was gonna do too.
You didn't steal it because I brought it to the table.
Anyway, Ayanna Pressley, just because. You were talking about Mayor Wu in our prior episode, and her leadership and her grace dealing with some of the foolishness that she was dealing with, and in that hearing too, a lot of that was some interplay with Ayanna Pressley also standing up and speaking truth, and I know that there's a lot going on with the party right now. There's a lot that we gotta fix, but not all is lost, right? We do have our bright spots, our stars, and our leaders who are still getting things done, who are saying the things that need to be said and saying it with grace and courage and just class. And one of those people is Ayanna Pressley, and if you don't know who she is, you should definitely go look her up. I'm excited just about her and her career in the future, and I'm hoping that one day she runs for Senate. So when the seat opens up, so big shout out to her, and I'm glad to have her.
And
So me, I have prepared my first one. I want to. This is actually hard. I have two. Can I do two?
Yeah.
All right. So the first one is Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Bernie Sanders. I would say I don't necessarily identify with either of their politics, but I do appreciate what they're doing to rally folks against what's happening in DC.
Yes.
And I think to Kevin's point is there are a few the party is taking a hit just image wise and what's happening in DC, but there are still a few good folks there.
Yep.
And I think that we need to give them credit, and the fact that they're going around the country to speak truth to power is just something that is admirable. Regardless of how you feel about their politics. So I wanted to give it to them. And then my second one is to you all for the show, what you all are doing just beyond with Maroon Bison as a brand. It's very needed. I think that we need people who are going to organize HBCU alum in a way that is beyond just trying to get us to donate to a PAC or to a candidate that's going to really give us a voice. And I also think that coming out of one of my big lessons from the 2024 election is the importance of black media, and that you all taking this up is, down the line, eventually is going to just yield so much for people's voices being heard, people better understanding, hopefully, our community, that we're not a monolith, as we've been talking about, and that ideally people will be educated and informed by this platform and be able to. I think legacy media is on its way out, and so just you all starting this now, and the timing is just want to give you all credit for it and continuing to do it, traveling, getting on the road, doing shows. It's just a lot. So I admire you all.
It is a lot, but no, I appreciate that. You kind of touched on that, and I'm glad you said it. AOC and Bernie, right? 9 years ago, well, not 9 years ago, you could identify more on the progressive side. But have you seen yourself evolve and change in terms of where you are on the Democratic spectrum? Are you more?
Yeah, you paying them business, man. know what I mean? Pay a little taxes, things start looking different.
No, but I definitely see myself, not as progressive as I never really identified with the label of progressive. I thought that I was more progressive on issues, and I may have been when I was younger, but as I get older and I think a little bit more cemented in my ways and how I see the world, I see myself more center of the aisle, and I realize that that's like also where majority of the country is. We try and put people into boxes and push people to one side, force people to choose one side or the other, but most folks are middle of the ground, and it's just like one or two issues that sways them one way or the other. And I don't ever see myself voting or registering as a Republican, but I could see myself helping a Republican candidate, depending on where, depending on who he is,
Because their
who they
shit's
are.
clear.
That also helps. But I mean, even like now, I'm seeing like there's a surge of black folks who are thinking about running as Republicans, and it's not because, especially in certain states and spaces, like I do some work in West Virginia, and like the only way to win an election is to be able to primary someone, and like if you're going into a general as a Democrat, you lost the election. So it's like, so you have black folks who are registering as Republicans, who are either running as Republicans or voting as Republicans in primaries to try to shift what's actually happening before it gets to the general, because they know they lost at that point. So I mean, I think the political landscape is just going to look totally different in the next 4 years, and even the Democratic Party, I just don't think I'm not sure it'll have the same strength that it has right now in 4 years, like that it'll have the same relevance.
The coalition is getting more complicated, and we have to catch up to it, and black men are a big part of that, right? Because I saw this stat. We all knew it was kind of fracturing, but Obama got a good chunk of the black male vote. I mean, like a majority, like in the 90s. But then Hillary was like at 82, and then Kamala was at like 77. It slips. So yeah.
So this will be a conversation for our next episode. We're going to really close this out. My Mama Award goes to our wives. Jill, please spell my name right, Aaron, and my lovely wife, Lady O. We appreciate y'all. Y'all have been very relentless and dedicated and supportive of us and what we do. And so you guys get the Mamba Award today, and we'll always get the Mamba Award every day. So on that note, appreciate you guys for tuning in. Anthony, appreciate you, brother.
Thank you all for having me.
Yes,
appreciate it.
Wrapping out, this is Big Rich.
Kev.
Special guest. Holla.